Warning: some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Redditors who have lived in a haunted house, what are your most unexplainable paranormal experiences? I had fallen asleep at night with my fan running, and woke up freezing. I turned it off. Not long after, I woke up hot, and turned it back on. This happened several times. The last time, I woke up hot once again, and the moment I opened my eyes, I heard the pull of my fan and looked up to see it slowly start speeding up. I said, "Thank you," and fell back asleep. In 2012, my stepfather overdosed on heroin and dropped dead in the hallway in his condo apartment. My mom had to move out shortly after since they were already behind on mortgage bills. A few months later, my lease went up and I was barely making ends meet and couldn't find a new roommate. My mom offered me the key to the condo apartment to squat for a few months until I saved up enough for my own apartment. I took the offer and moved into the condo apartment. After a month or so, I was asleep in the living room and I had this dream of him standing in the hallway facing the living room. He was looking at me and smiling/laughing. Even made a stupid joke and everything. It wasn't disturbing at all, just bittersweet. Then I suddenly woke when I felt some pressure stroking down my head and back. There was nothing around me and it tripped me the hell out. As a skeptical person that doesn't believe in the paranormal, it has to be some kind of sensory hallucination. It was still nice to see him in my dream once again though. Made me tear up typing this. R.I.P. Darren. Mildly interesting fact, he dropped dead on July 13th in 2012. On a Friday the 13th. Moved from the US to the UK and our parents bought an old beat-up house. It still had lead pipes for the water. Nightmare all on its own. Anyway, work proceeded on the house whilst we lived there. We started seeing bright lights in the corners of rooms at night. Footsteps on floorboards. The house had carpet. I was about 6 at the time and started getting woken up in the night by a little girl, who would dance on my chest of drawers for me. I was freaking terrified. My mom just fobbed it off as me dreaming. Workmen complained of strange things happening like tools being moved and odd feeling like being watched. After about a year of this, my eldest sister's friend stayed overnight. She woke the whole house up screaming, saying a little girl had been in her room. She had apparently pulled her from the bed. The friend left the house and refused to ever come back. Mom decided she might need to do something about it and got some advice. He suggested my mom and the whole family should treat the presences as part of the family. So when we got home we shout, "Hi, we're home, did you have a good day?" Over time the house settled and we didn't get any more trouble. We also found out a little girl did die in the house of asthma. My parents still live there and it is a beautiful homely place now. I live in a house built in the 1800s. It's survived the 2 world wars and it's seen some shit, I imagine. One of the previous owners had 2 sons, who both committed suicide. A lot of strange stuff happens. The animals, dog and parrots, will wake up from their naps and follow something with their heads just as they would follow me if I walk around. Also, before I switched rooms in the house, my brother had a room and he refused to sleep there as he would hear voices. He slept with my parents, he was a child, until the day he got my old room and since then has slept in that room without problems. There's also a whole floor we don't use and I sleep in the attic, and I pass through that floor to get to my attic. Weird explanation, but it's a weird house, and I have a motion activated light there that goes on as I'm walking the stairs to that unused floor. It would also switch on in the middle of the night while nobody is walking under the motion detector. Also, there's cold spots. I lived in a house that seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers. Every event that happened never involved some mysterious figure, but a known person being in a place where they should not have been. Here are a few examples. I was a teenager at the time, and I was instant messaging my GF at the time with my webcam turned on. I had the viewer up so that I could see myself in the webcam. Behind me, there was the stairs leading up, left of camera view, and the entrance to the living room, right of camera view. My younger sister would typically fall asleep every night on the couch in front of the TV and make her way up to bed in the middle of the night. At one point in my webcam view, I saw my sister leave the living room and go up the stairs. The thing that struck me as odd was that I didn't hear anything. It was an older Victorian house, so the wooden floor and stairs were loud AF. Without saying anything to my GF, I got up and looked into the living room and there was my sister passed out on the couch. I sat back down and asked my GF if she had seen anything in my camera. She said, "Yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs." My family was all getting ready to go somewhere. I was sitting in the car with my mom and we were waiting on my sister who was still in the house. After a bit she comes out and gets in the car and just looks at me like WTF? I ask her what's wrong and she says that just before she walked out of the house she thought I was still inside, so she yelled up the stairs, "First Lieutenant_0 we're leaving." And apparently I yelled back, "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." Edit. Some more examples since many people have asked. I did put some of these in a response lower, but I'll add them here for visibility. My mom woke up to someone tapping her foot and she said someone was standing at the end of her bed who faded out after a couple seconds. She said it looked like me. I had an encounter where I woke up and felt like someone was under my covers laying up against me. When I said something, my blanket visibly deflated and I no longer felt anything. I include this with doppelgangers because though I didn't see what I felt under the blanket, it laid like my GF would have laid against me. When I was 22 I was in the military and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It still took like a year after the diagnosis to separate from the military, but I went home on leave for the holidays about a month after the diagnosis. Anyone that has insulin-dependent diabetes typically carries around some sort of kit. Mine is black zip-up pouch and it has a glucometer, insulin pen, needles, and alcohol pads. Right after I left home to head back from leave my mom texts me to ask if I'm missing my diabetic kit. I look, and I'm not. She sends me a picture of a diabetic kit and asks if I know it. I've never seen this kit before in my life. Apparently, my sister went into her bedroom and discovered it outside of her window propped up like someone had set it there. Oh, also, her bedroom is on the second floor. Nobody else we know has diabetes. A lady who had 2 husbands die on her in the same house. That's the house my dad decides to buy. The first one hung himself from the rafters in the garage and the second one fell ill and died in his bed in the basement. I lived in the basement room and often just felt like I was being watched all the time. The bedroom in the basement has a secret storage room behind a bookshelf with a locking latch. I would always wake up to find the door wide open. It happened so often that I would wake up cold and routinely go shut and lock the latch of the door in the middle of the night. For the longest time I thought it was my dad or stepbrothers messing with me, but it wasn't. My stepbrother now occupies that room and he says it still happens to him and that he's even seen it open on its own. There are no air vents or anything, so I've ruled out wind. Also in the garage, I always see a light coming from under the door through the crack only to open the door to pitch black. I've heard sounds coming from the garage only to find saw blades clanging together and slightly rotating in their place on the whole storage wall. Didn't think anything of it at first, but when you find shit moving on more than one occasion, it makes you look over your shoulder at the rafters and wonder. I lived in a house for about 5 years that was haunted, but not in a malicious way. In a shitty roommate kind of way. I'd come home to the windows on the second floor being open when it was raining. To food containers being open in the fridge that I hadn't touched yet. The worst was that the ghost hated clocks. She hated them. I had antique cuckoo clocks that had worked for 50 years that would just stop. Brand new wall clocks that ate through batteries like it was candy. My watch ended up on the floor one morning, the crystal shattered, even though I knew I slept with it on. The one that pissed me off the most was that I got a brand new Kit Kat clock for Christmas, and the bitch threw it off the wall. I was cooking and out of corner of my eye saw the cat freaking fly. Turned around and it was across the kitchen. Broken. It was brand new. Man, she was a bitch. When I was around 9 to 10 years old, I remember waking up to see a large shadow stood at the foot of my bed. I was living with my dad at the time. He has a very large, 5 floors, terrace house built in the 1800s. Every so often there would be an unexplainable event happen, such as footsteps when there's no one there or voices. On the night this happened, it was just my dad and I in the house. My sister was staying with my mom at the time. I woke up and noticed the door to my room was wide open. I normally sleep with it closed. I then became aware of a large, around 7 feet tall, shadow-like figure watching me from the end of the bed. When the figure noticed me, it seemed to melt into the floor and the door to my room slammed shut. Understandably, I was slightly traumatized by the whole experience. Asked my dad the next day if he was in my room and he denied any knowledge of the event. He's not the type of person that likes jokes. I watched one of our cats being pulled backwards about 5 feet by her tail. She was walking through the dining area and suddenly was sliding backwards, as if someone was pulling her by her tail. Only there wasn't. She freaked out and tried to run, but couldn't immediately as something held on for a brief second before letting her go. I tend to think that was the handiwork of a 4 or 5-year-old girl ghost who hangs out and she just wanted to play with the kitty. My uncle's house out on a very eastern part of NY was said to be haunted due to the family that used to own it in the 1800s decided not to give it to the stablemen and sold it instead. He and the maid were said to have haunted the place. We always used to joke that you would hear people or things moving at night, but since the house is so old, We used to just laugh it off. My uncle's friend had her and her sister stay over the house one night, and the friend noticed a maid bringing towels down the stairs when she woke. She saw the maid again, bringing what looked like a percolator, down the stairs. She was so impressed by my uncle hiring staff. He is a neurologist in NYC, so he had a habit of spending a little bit extra. She went back to bed and woke up later downstairs to see my uncle and his friend just chatting. She asked where the maid went, and she thought that the maid was cooking breakfast. My uncle had no idea what she was talking about and asked what she looked like. The sister explained and he laughed. Walked her to the living room and pointed to an old picture. She said that was the woman. My uncle replied, "Yay, she has been dead for about 100 years. So I used to live in a big house, 6 bedrooms, 4 bath, basement, etc., by myself. I was there as a hiring perk and to look after the place for my boss who lived out of state but owned the home, one of those win-win situations. The first couple of months were fine, but when winter came I started hearing things coming from the second floor. I lived pretty much exclusively on the first floor. It started with little bumps and bangs coming from above where I had my computer set up and progressed to distinct footsteps coming and going across the second floor. I had been up to the second floor to check up on it from time to time, and I knew that there were unfinished areas up there. One place always stuck out, an unfinished room that was a sort of a walk-in closet for one of the upstairs bedrooms. It was attached to the garage attic, complete unlit. It was open when I went up to investigate the noises. I shut the door and locked it. 2 nights later, more noises. Footsteps leading from unfinished room to the bathroom, then nothing. The worst part, the door. The door that led to the unfinished room would not stay closed or locked. I tried everything. Eventually I pushed the bed up against the door to keep it from opening. That seemed to work. A few months went by without the door coming open, but I would find it unlocked all the time. As time passed I would hear noises all over the house. Mostly footsteps, but the occasional thump with no explanation. I cannot explain how horrifying it is to hear little taps up and down the hall from the other side of a bathroom door during your morning shower. I eventually moved out, but another employee moved in to take my place. His stay there only lasted about a month. The story he told me is that he was shaving one morning before work and he heard a slam like someone dropped a heavy stack of books right outside his bedroom door, then heavy footsteps like someone running down the hall. He won't stay there anymore and no one in the company will live in the house. I lived in an old, haunted house in college. Things got so weird that everyone moved out except for me and one roommate. Here's a few. I woke up at 3 a.m. because my roommate's door kept opening and slamming shut. From bed, I yelled for him to stop, only to realize I was the only one home that weekend. As soon as I yelled, the slamming stopped, but the hippie beads I had hanging outside my closed door began to sway perfectly, yet violently, against the door frame, for a half hour, while I debated if I should pop out my air-conditioned unit and jump out of the window. I laid in the fetal position in bed till it stopped. I woke up at 3 a.m., alone again, hearing the Nintendo in the back porch playing loudly. I figured a drunk kid came in and started playing. I grabbed a bat and walked towards the back of the house as the music got louder and louder. As soon as I opened the door, it was completely quiet. Mind you, it was loud enough to wake me up. I had friends over and told them the house was haunted. No one believed me, so I asked the ghost to do anything to prove it was there. As soon as I asked, all the lights in the house began flickering for about a minute straight. This was the middle of the day. Everyone witnessed it. Almost everyone who stayed at my house had sleep paralysis at least once in the house. Every time something spooky happened, the house would smell like old lady, flowery, strong perfume. This house had a door built into the flooring that led to the basement. We always had a rug covering it up so no one knew it was there. Things would constantly go missing in the house, and turning up in the basement. This house had a coal chute from when it was heated by coal back in the day. Missing stuff would always be placed on the chute for us to come and get. Roommate had some issues. Once while playing video games late at night he saw mist kind of hovering from the kitchen then move into the bathroom. The bathroom had a trapdoor that led to the attic. That's where we figured the old lady ghost used to like to hang out. Roommate was up late. He went to go lock the doors and turn off lights. When he turned his back on the room and walked to the door, someone breathed into his ear. He thought it was me. I was sleeping. He turned around, pissed himself, and ran to his room. He was too afraid to come out and turn off lights and TV. Loud thumps in attic at all hours. For peace of mind, we told ourselves squirrels must have gotten in there. Voices would wake us up in the middle of the night. I spent many mornings on the front porch waiting for the sun to come up before I went back in the house. Coincidentally, I had a friend years later that rented from the same landlord, same town, different house, where he and all of his roommates moved out because that house was also haunted. I didn't think it was too weird, until he was telling me that when all of the weird stuff happened, it was accompanied by old lady, flowery, stanky perfume. Also, a lot of people had sleep paralysis in that house as well. I used to live in an old big 5-bedroom house with 6 other people. My so and I shared one of the rooms. I saw a stranger in my room when I was in my 20s. It wasn't exactly visible, but I somewhat knew it was right there in the corner of the room. My so was next to me sleeping. While I had my eyes open, I knew it was there. So I closed my eyes. I tried to wish it away. I opened my eyes, and it was now next to the bed, looking at me. I closed my eyes again, and suddenly relief came. I opened my eyes, nothing there. I saw it once again at the stairs. It was only a brief moment this time, and then it was gone. I lived in one when I was a teen, along with my parents. Several instances come to mind. We were remodeling an old farmhouse and had been there a couple of months before witnessing anything. One day I was underneath my truck, which was supported by only a jack. Stupid, I know, I was in the middle of working on it, with no good reason to get out at that moment. Suddenly the overwhelming urge to get out from underneath overwhelmed me. No sooner than I got out, the truck fell to the ground, the jack had slipped. Freaked Dad out, he thought I was under it. When Mom got home, we mentioned it, and she started crying, sobbing pretty hard. It turns out the previous owner died in the driveway, under a vehicle, in that spot. I would often see moving shadows, and strangely hear music from the upstairs area. The windows of the old house were caulked shut, and blackbirds would often get caught between the panes. We ended up replacing all the windows, but we had to break 3 inside panes to get them out. One of the more disturbing things happened when my mother was cooking breakfast. She turned away to get something out of the cabinet, and when she turned back around, all the forks set out were bent straight up. When I was younger, I used to take naps upstairs, but by the time I was 8 years old I absolutely refused to go upstairs. The upstairs had 2 large closets, attics. They ran from one side of the upstairs all the way to the other side on both sides. It was essentially a crawl space that was maybe 30 feet long. It started one day when a friend and I went crawling from one side to the other with flashlights like kids normally do. Then I saw a girl, sitting there, in the corner acting like she wanted to play with us. I know a lot of people say when they see a ghost they aren't scared. Just interested. Nope, I was beyond terrified. This girl looked normal, had blonde hair, a nice dress and seemed friendly. I stayed silent, kept crawling behind my friend and got out of the closet. Told him what I saw in there. He said he didn't see it, but felt like he didn't want to go back in. Then my parents would occasionally send me upstairs to get something, and when I would get up there I would see the doors swing open. As if they were trying to get me to come inside. I would lose toys and wouldn't be able to find them anywhere. Suddenly, my parents would be fishing out Christmas presents out of the attic and we would find some of my toys in there. I remember being 8 years old, my parents are asleep still in the morning, and I leashed up my dog to go take on the monster in the attic. My dog, usually up for anything, refused to go off the top step into the attic. My parents never believed me with all the weird things that happened in that house. I would get blamed for things that happened all over the house. Leaving lights on, toys all over, things I knew I didn't do. Well, anyway, we move out of there when I'm 10. Not a week passes before the new owners call us up and ask if the house is haunted. Their daughter sleeps upstairs. She says that she has been playing with a blonde-haired girl at night. My parents laughed at how crazy these new homeowners must be. To make an already long story short, the girl started appearing in other parts of the house for them. They kept in contact with us. They would look over while watching TV and see the girl sitting on their daughter's lap, etc. They looked up on the computer the past owners of the house, found an old dressmaker that lived there, and yep, a picture of the little girl wearing one of the ladies' dresses. The family that moved in there were absolutely torn apart by the events. Got divorced, Dad stayed living in the house and ended up taking his own life in that house. From ages 5 to 17 I lived in a house with activity. It was all pretty basic run-of-the-mill stuff: footsteps, voices, lights turning on and off, doors opening and shutting, batteries draining, etc. If we started renovating, which we almost always were, they'd get more active and start throwing stuff. I got used to it. They didn't hurt us, so we just let it go. Even my father started believing after a while. But the worst thing they ever did was while we were moving in. I was 5. My friend and I were playing in the only room that was finished in the basement while my parents were moving the stuff in. My friend's parents were helping. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut. No wind, no draft, no explanation. Then the lock engaged with a click, and someone started laughing. We were stuck in the room for 2 hours. Edit, forgot about the time my Newfoundland, the sweetest dog I ever met, stood in the doorway of my parents' room with all her hackles up, barking at nothing. Barking her get the fuck out bark. Don't forget to like and subscribe, for more daily videos, and join the spooky squad.